Hello, travelers, and welcome to Go See, Do Explore.
Here, we dive deep into the heart of travel, sharing hidden gems, unforgettable experiences, and the stories that make each destination unique.
Whether you're a seasoned traveler or dreaming of your next getaway, you're in the right place to get inspired.
I'm Christopher.
And I'm Ashleigh.
And together, we'll set the course for your next great adventure and discover the stories that make each place unforgettable.
It's time to go, see, and do more. Let's explore. Hello, everybody. We are here for our 50th episode of Go See, Do Explore.
That's right.
Insert celebratory music. When we were talking about the Expedia hacks, and we realized that Detroit is up in popularity 175% or whatever it was, this would be a good time for us to use our knowledge of, our nearest big city. So we are going to be doing our top 10 things to do in Detroit. We decided to keep it Detroit City proper. So unfortunately, the Henry Ford will not be on this list because it is outside of the city of Detroit. If you are new to the podcast, when we do these top 10s, we both came up with a list of a little more than 10 things, and the other person doesn't know what's on our list. So they always spark interesting conversations.
Mm-hmm. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of overlap. But then again, I always say that, and then it depends. So
I put 10 things on my list just in case.
Okay. Yeah,
so if not, we're going to have some honorable mentions at the end.
I think you get to go first.
All right. The number one on my list is a place I feel like we've talked a lot about lately. Although now that I'm saying that, I'm realizing that it was at a family gathering and not on this podcast.
Oh.
But that is the Motown Museum. Did that make your list?
I forgot to put it on there, but it should be.
So the Motown Museum is in downtown Detroit on what street is it on? Do you know off the top of your head?
Oh, West Grand Boulevard.
That sounds right. It encompasses a couple of houses. Currently, they're doing a big expansion that's going to open in 2026. So if you are planning a trip to Detroit in 2026, you hopefully will be able to see the expanded archives and recording studios and all the crazy stuff that they're putting in. But the museum, as it currently is, houses the Hitsville U.S.A, which was the home of Berry Gordy and, the beginnings of Motown Records. And you get to do a tour of the house and you get to go, I think it's Studio A or Studio 1, something like that. You get to see the studio where so many famous Motown hits were recorded and you get to sing there. So you can tell people that you have sang in that studio.
And dance.
And dance, yes. And then there's a small little exhibit space with the exhibits changing all the time. So it's a really, really cool place. And of all the places on the list, it's the one that we first visited the most recently. And I can't believe, especially because I don't know that we've talked about this on the podcast, but my dad owned a chain of record stores in the Detroit area when I was growing up. And I just don't know how we never made it to the Motown Museum.
So I love Motown, like the music, and not just because I'm from here. It's just music that I really enjoy. And I think it's so cool that it's from not far from where I grew up and where we live. And seeing that place was really, really fun. I thought I was going to like it, and I liked it like even more than I thought I would.
Yeah, it totally exceeded my expectations.
Yes.
It's one of those things that, I think it was about 5 years ago now, I made that Michigan bucket list that we've talked about over several episodes. And I put the Motown Museum on there having never been, and it had been like on our list of things to do. And yeah, I was blown away when we went there. So yeah, definitely, if you're spending time in Detroit, put the Motown Museum on your list.
I think you probably know what's going to be first on my list, and that is Belle Isle Park.
That one is also on my list.
Yeah. Belle Isle is an old city park in Detroit. It was built, or not built, but rather designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, just like Central Park in New York and many other famous city parks in the United States. It is a small island, relatively small island in the Detroit River. It's in the city of Detroit, but between, the mainland Detroit and Canada. And about 1/3 of it is really like finely developed park, and about 2/3 of it is more wilderness-y with like nature trails and stuff like that. It has a long history, of course, as you'd imagine. It's kind of a heyday and then some decline. And then it was leased to the Michigan State Park system during the Detroit bankruptcy. And the state park system has just invested an absolute ton of money in fixing it up. And it is an amazing place to do all sorts of things. We could talk, and maybe should talk more at length about all there is to do at Belle Isle. I thought, honestly, like I could make like my 5 here, all Belle Isle things to do. It's a great city park. Like, you know, city park's definitely a genre of park. And if you appreciate those, you'll like this. It's got really cool architecture, some interesting buildings, an old aquarium, a really nice conservatory. We kayaked there last summer. That was interesting. We should tell that story sometime.
I think we did.
Did we talk about it?
Yeah,
okay.
I think we did.
It has a marble lighthouse. I think the only marble lighthouse, or the largest marble lighthouse in the country. Like it's not very often that lighthouses are made out of marble.
Because it's very expensive.
Yeah.
And typically lighthouses are put up as fast and cheaply as possible.
Right. And I mean, lots more stuff. So maybe we'll talk more about Belle Isle in the future. But I think if I had to pick one thing, my favorite thing to do in Detroit is to go to Belle Isle.
It's funny because we've been going to Belle Isle for a long time, even, you know, before it was a state park. And this past summer was when we went kayaking. It was the first time I had been there when the fountain. So the Scott Fountain is a famous fountain on Belle Isle, and it's got lions and there's birds shooting water, and it's really, really cool. But for whatever reason, we always apparently go there in the winter.
Yeah.
Go to Belle Isle in the winter. And so it was the first time I ever saw the fountain with the water in it, just this past summer.
Yeah.
But yes, Belle Isle is also a wonderful thing to do in Detroit. I'm going to go with something that I feel like is maybe under the radar for a lot of people, and that is the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. So it's one of those things that I don't know that I would have sought out as a visitor to Detroit, but in college, it was something that I could do to get extra credit for a class. And so we went on a weekend, and I was absolutely blown away. I learned a lot of stuff about African American history in the United States. And just the way that museum is laid out, the way it tells that story is very moving. And it's a very emotional museum. And I think it should definitely be on any visitor's list for the city of Detroit.
Yeah. The quality of the exhibits there was just first rate.
Mm-hmm.
It's one, actually, I mean, we haven't been in a long time. Maybe
No.
we should go back to. But yeah, that's one to definitely have on your list.
And it's one I just don't feel like people talk about, like the Motown Museum, and one that I'm sure
Right.
is going to be on the list later.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to make sure to talk about it.
Okay, that's a good one. I had forgotten about that too, but yeah, I completely agree. Okay, probably my second favorite thing to do in Detroit, and something that I want to do soon, is to go to the Detroit Institute of Arts.
Yeah, that was the museum
Yeah.
that I was
Yes.
assuming would be on the list.
This is a famous museum, of course, but it's famous for a reason. The collection there is really, really good. It's definitely on par with a lot of the other great museums in the country in terms of the original artwork that it has. Of course, the architecture of the building, like a lot of museums, also really incredible. Very famous, and deservedly so, there are the Detroit industry murals. If you haven't seen these, just Google them up. I'm sure you can find them. Or, you know, maybe don't use Google. They don't need your traffic. Use DuckDuckGo or something. But Detroit industry murals painted by Diego Rivera, and they depict Detroit industry. Detroit has, you know, this history as a place of great manufacturing at a time where manufacturing was an incredibly pivotal thing that was happening. And so it depicts, of course, the automotive industry, but also the aviation industry, also like scientific medicine. And there's a lot of symbolism and a lot of really interesting ways that Diego Rivera used like people and images to cause you to think about both the good, like the overwhelming good that industrialization was producing, but also the challenges and even the dangers of industrialization, all in this place, which was a major hub of that. And so, you know, it's a very famous thing. I'm not telling you about something that's like under the radar here if you know anything about art in Detroit, but it's definitely something to see. I could go on. I mean, there are lots of other things in the DIA that I love, but there's nothing in particular I guess I feel the need to call out right now. Just that's another one that is just a really good museum.
They have Pewabic tile, which is something that was made in Detroit, correct?
I think it was made in Detroit. The materials are from the Upper Peninsula.
That's what I was confused about.
And maybe they made it there too. I don't know exactly, but yeah, the materials are from the Upper Peninsula.
And it's something that the production of it is incredibly toxic. So they no longer create Puebik tile, but they have a lot that you can see at the museum. And one of the times we visited, I would check their website for this. We got into like a free guided tour of the museum, which was really cool because she took us to things that you would walk right by otherwise. Like there is a painting that's in one of the rooms that's on the ceiling, and they have you like stand and look at a mirror to see it. So you don't have to like crane your neck. And it's one of those things that, I didn't necessarily know it was there. So you walk right by it otherwise. So I would definitely, if you're planning to visit the DIA, definitely check out their website to see when those tours are happening so you can get in on one.
The only other thing I'll say about the DIA, I guess, is this is a museum that, like, when we've gone to other museums and have talked to people, the people that work at those museums know the DIA, and if they've been there, they like it. It's a museum lover's museum. If you like art museums, it's definitely one that you should check out.
And I think I mentioned on one of the recent episodes that it frequently gets voted the best art museum in the country on the USA Today 10 Best polls.
Yeah.
Like just a month or so ago, it was voted best museum again. So.
Wow.
All right. The next one on my list, I couldn't decide between these like 3 or 4 things, so I just lumped them all together. And I'm going to say, do a historic building tour. So the Guardian building is a really unique, what is the style of the Guardian?
Well, it's Art Deco, but more specifically, it's Aztec Deco, which is a type of Art Deco.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting architecture, very interesting aesthetic. The Fisher Building is another one that you can tour that's ornate and golden and
also Art Deco, but a very different type of Art Deco.
Very different. And then I know we talked on the podcast in the summer about the Michigan Central Station that was recently reopened. I believe currently they're still doing guided tours, but you need to book them in advance on their website. Well, years ago, I don't know that they still offer this, but Pure Detroit is a store that is located in the Fisher Building, I believe, selling things that were made in the city. And I believe they still offer tours of the Fisher Building. But at one time, they offered a free walking tour of the city about the architecture. And it was so interesting. Detroit has the largest collection of pre-war skyscrapers anywhere in the world, mostly because that was when the money was in Detroit, whereas New York and Chicago and LA are places that continued to have wealth. But then in Detroit at that time, a lot of the money was leaving the city. So they didn't tear down these old buildings and they're still standing. And it's just very, very interesting. So if you could find a tour like that on Viator or one of those, I highly recommend it. It was very interesting.
Yeah, that was really fun. And that was paired with the tour of the Guardian building.
Yes, which one. I don't think Pure Detroit is still doing. But,
no, okay.
But I'm sure there are other tours out there.
Yeah. The Guardian building in particular has these tapestries that are crazy, like these ceiling tapestries that, and on first glance, you might just think that the ceiling is painted or something. You might not realize that it's actually fabric. The next one on my list, not because it's amazing, but because it's unique and weird, is the Detroit People Mover. So the Detroit People Mover is this like city tram. I don't think it's a monorail. It's more like
it looks like a monorail.
It kind of looks like that's kind of the idea. I think it's on 2 rails, but it's this elevated train. And it does this loop in the city center of Detroit that I think is only like 2 miles long or something like that. It's really short. And it goes basically between a couple of the main centers of downtown Detroit. So it's like somewhat useless. It's nice in the winter, definitely, if you're trying to get like from point A to point B and where you're going is not that far from where you are. But it was built to serve as a hub for a larger urban transit network that never materialized. So when you understand it in that context, it makes a lot more sense because it was supposed to connect with what is now M1 Rail. That was an idea a long, long time ago that only recently materialized that takes you out of town. It was also supposed to connect with these other lines that would get you in and out of the city that have never materialized. But it's cheap and it's fun and it's kind of like a 20th century urban transit oddity, kind of like the monorail in Seattle or like that weird West Virginia university pod thing that exists. Like, there are these like weird urban transit things all over the country. Detroit People Mover is definitely one of them.
I don't know how often they have this, but if you look into Detroit history tours, they have a People Mover tour. We haven't done it. It's on our list to do in the next few weeks. I mean, when we do it, I'm sure we'll come back and we'll talk about it. But I would definitely check out Detroit history tours if you are going to be in Detroit and see if that tour exists. Not to totally go off on a tangent, but they also have lots of other cool tours. They have a food tour that takes you to the different neighborhoods on Thursdays. So definitely check that out. I think it's time for a wine break.
Okay, let's go to the wine break. We're here for the wine break, and today we are celebrating our 50th episode. So we have something special. This is Prosecco Superiore, and you'll notice, you can drink it. Let's drink it. We're not going to talk that much about wine today. I put it in a flute for us.
Ooh, so fancy.
Yes. You'll notice, what do you see here on the bottle?
DOCG.
DOCG, right? Not just DOC. The G stands for the Italian word for guarantee, but it's a quality designation that is higher than DOC, right? So Prosecco Superiore is one of the highest quality Prosecco designations. It's from just 15 miles northeast-ish of Venice, a couple of towns in that area, Veneto, but a very specific part of Veneto. And we're having Prosecco because we're celebrating the 50th episode of this show.
It's very good. Prosecco tends to be sweeter than champagne, and so that's nice. Mm-hmm. Super dry champagne is not something that I love. Yeah. Very good celebratory vino.
This style is known for being a little bit on the sweeter side than some Proseccos. You can definitely detect that. It's not like sweet, but
it's not like Moscato, sparkling Moscato.
No, it's nowhere near that. We're thankful that we've been around for 50 episodes. We've got some big plans in the works for Go See Do Explore. More videos. We're working on a guide to Michigan wines. We've got some ideas to help you all maybe plan some trips, things like that. All those announcements will be forthcoming as we're ready, but in the meantime, just gonna enjoy the rest of this Prosecco. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, good wine break.
All right. Next on my list is to see a show. So Detroit has a lot of really cool theaters, from the Masonic Temple, the Fox Theater, the Fillmore, the Fisher Theater, the Opera House, the Symphony. There's so much art, performance art that you can see. And a lot of these are in very, very cool buildings. The Fox Theater in Detroit is so ornate and unique, and the seats are jammed right next to each other.
The seats are not comfortable, but everything else is great.
But it is absolutely beautiful. We talked about the Fisher Building. The theater in it is also just absolutely beautiful. The last time we were in the Masonic, we saw Josh Gates, who was talking about how the building looked like it was built by the Illuminati.
I think he described it as Illuminati chic. We're going to see a show this fall at the Masonic.
Yeah, so definitely check out Ticketmaster or StubHub or whatever and see if there's anything interesting at one of the many performance spaces in the city, because they are all just beautiful, and so you can enjoy kind of the aesthetics along with your show.
I'm glad you said that one. I had Fox Theater on my list in particular. I agree with in general, but that one I think in particular as far as a venue is really unique.
Yeah, it's the decor in that one is crazy, but I figured just hit them all at one time.
I agree. This actually works well with my next one, which I would say consider seeing a sporting event in
that
Detroit.
was on my list too.
Whatever you like. There's hockey, football, basketball, and baseball. So depending on the time of year and the sport you like, all right downtown. This is related to what you were saying with theaters too, in that Detroit, it was probably, 20-ish years ago now that this effort really started in earnest. But a lot of Detroit's entertainment and sports existed outside of the city limits at that time and had for a number of years. The Red Wings were downtown, but the Lions and the Pistons were up in like Auburn Hills and Pontiac, and the Tigers were downtown, but they were a little outside the city center. There's a concentrated effort to move both theater and sports inside of the downtown area. Now, those who know Detroit well will know that this was not without controversy and is not without controversy to this day, even with the nature of some public-private partnerships and certain families that control a lot of assets and parking lots in downtown Detroit. But I will say, for you as a traveler, it's amazing to be able to go see a show or go to a sporting event. There's restaurants right there. There's parks. Like, everything is right there downtown. And so you can really have like a good day or a good evening visiting multiple things, all basically within walking distance. And you can park in any number of parking lots owned by the people that own all these teams and venues. We won't get into it, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun. I will say too, we were talking about architecture before. If you're going to see the Pistons or the Red Wings, they both now play at Little Caesars Arena.
The Pizza Arena.
The Pizza Arena would have been a better name. But that building was modeled after designs by Albert Kahn, who was one of Detroit's great architects, great Art Deco architects. And even in the sports, there's art, I guess, if that makes sense.
The next one on my list is a place that we haven't actually been yet, but it is high up on our Detroit bucket list, if you will, and that is to visit the Ford Piquette Avenue plant. Mm-hmm. So this is the building where the Model T was built. So the building, which is on Piquette Avenue, was built in 1904 in the late Victorian style, modeled after New England textile mills with wooden post and beam frame. It was the first purpose-built factory by the Ford Motor Company. Before this time, they were renting a space. So models B, C, F, K, N, R, S, and T were assembled here. The Model T was developed and introduced in 1908 as the 1909 model. The first 12,000 Model Ts were assembled in this plant. And so it's just a really cool piece of Detroit history, of automotive history, of Ford history. And it's something I've wanted to check out for a while.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. So my last one, and I'm trying to stick to places that I have been to. I have a whole list of other places I want to go that I might mention in a minute. But my last one, we mentioned in Ashleigh's cheater option of selecting all of the interesting historical buildings in Detroit, Michigan Central Station. I would say while you're over there, go to Mexican Town.
Oh.
Yeah. There are lots of great restaurants, grocery stores. We really like going to Mexican Village, which, as far as like authentic Mexican cuisine goes, is not really it. There are other options down there that I think are that, but Mexican Village is just like this classic Detroit restaurant. If you like Tex-Mex, and it's great. It's fun. There's some great Mexican groceries down there too. And it's just right there. So if you're doing Michigan Central Station, I would say next pop over to Mexican Town.
I feel like the food of Detroit could have been its own item on this list.
I don't feel like, this is maybe a topic for another episode if we keep talking about Detroit. I don't feel like I have a great handle on there are definitely there's food of Detroit that I know, right? Like I know the Greek Town stuff. We have some familiarity with Mexican Town. There are some other miscellaneous restaurants we know, but I don't feel like I have a great grasp on the overall food scene, which is a shame because we live, 50 miles away. Maybe this is what we should be doing every weekend.
No more local restaurants. We're going to Detroit every Friday night.
Until we figure it out. So those are our 10.
Yes.
Is there anything else you want to just dump here at the end?
Another one that we haven't been to that's high up on my list is Eastern Market.
Yeah.
This year we're going for Flower Day. I know I said that last year. And then it came and I was lazy.
You were tired?
No, that's exactly what it was.
I think I was tired too.
I don't know why. And then the other one that I had on my list is the DNR Outdoor Adventure Center, which is located in the riverfront in the historic Globe Building. It can kind of give you a taste of the outdoor activities that you can find in all over Michigan. So especially if you're visiting in the winter and you have kids, I think this is a great option, and I believe it's free. There are hands-on activities, exhibits, and simulators. You get to walk behind. You can see the backside of water. You can go into a fishing boat and catch a fish, hike or mountain bike or snowmobile. Yeah, just a really interesting place that we probably should check out sometime. And also in that same area is the Milliken Lighthouse right on the Detroit River.
Mm-hmm. I had a couple that we haven't been to that I'm just like noting that I'd like to go to. I had Eastern Market on mine too. Another one that I'm familiar with, and I know people that have been, but we've never been, is Cliff Bells. Cliff Bells is a famous jazz club in Detroit that is like really cool. And like, look at this. I have pictures.
It does look cool.
Like this really cool looking jazz club. It's in that like downtown area by the Fox Theater and all that. It's not far from there. And so, yeah, an amazing music venue. Our list obviously shows that we don't have a lot to say about like nightlife. But that's a place I would love to go.
We didn't talk about any of the many casinos if you're into gambling.
Right. That's true. Oh, another one that I think I would like to see if we could like, I don't know, bike or something. There's this greenway now, the DeQuinder Cut, that they converted. I don't know if it was like what it was they converted, but now it's like a greenway that you can like walk on or bike on that looks really nice for like urban outdoor activity.
Oh, and the
riverfront was on my list too. I didn't mention it.
I was gonna say Riverwalk, but that's the wrong city.
Yeah, you can walk along a lot of the Detroit River now, and it's really nice. The other one, and this is not a joke, I promise it's going to sound like a joke, but it's not, is I know we're sticking to the city of Detroit, but you can go to Canada.
That is true.
Like the going to Canada is in the city of Detroit, I guess. Once you're in Canada and you're in Canada. But Detroit is literally, if you didn't gather from us discussing this, is literally across the Detroit River from Windsor, Ontario.
It is literally north of Canada.
Yeah, that's true. And so if you've got the ability to go to Canada, if you've got a passport or whatever else you might need to go, you can go. No, you can't walk yet. I think there are buses actually that will take you, or you can drive, of course, if you have a car. There's a bridge and a tunnel and a bridge that they're working on. The bridge that they're working on is going to have pedestrian access, but it's kind of weird because like of all the crossings, it's located in the least convenient place for pedestrians.
That's true.
At least on the...
Oh, yeah, it's supposed to be highway to highway.
It's a freeway to freeway connection, but that's the one that they're building the pedestrian access on. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see how that works out, I guess. Yeah, why wouldn't you just drive? Like, because I'm like, you could just drive there and park and then walk, but like, why wouldn't you just drive at that point?
You Uber.
I don't know.
And then you get an Uber on the other side.
I guess having pedestrian crossing on any of the crossings is better than none, but it's probably of all the crossings, like I guess you wouldn't want to walk through that tunnel either, but
oh, that'd be a little scary, a little bit fumey.
Yeah,
it would be cool, like if the Gordie Howe Bridge, if it reduced congestion enough on the Ambassador Bridge that they could add a pedestrian lane. That would be pretty cool. I don't know if that will happen, but
yeah. Anyway, thanks for being with us for 50 episodes.
We hope you enjoyed this one and all the ones that are to come.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.
That's all for today's episode of Go, See, Do, Explore. Thank you for joining us and sharing in the wonder of travel.
Keep the spirit of today's adventure alive by checking out our blog at goseedoexplore.com for even more travel inspiration.
Don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps fellow travelers find us and join our community.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and keep traveling by any means necessary.
I'm Christopher.
And I'm Ashleigh, bidding you farewell and happy exploring.